So welcome to A Century of Service. I am Sara Fawcett. I'm President and CEO of United Way of the Midlands. And this is the first of a series of podcasts that is celebrating service in our community over the last 100 years. Because since 1925, United Way has been serving the Midlands, has been serving the people of the Midlands in many ways, including through education, health, economic mobility, workforce development. And so this podcast is an opportunity really to reflect on 100 years of service, to spotlight some incredible people who make our community what it is, and to explore what it means to have a legacy of service. So over the next series of podcasts, we're going to be talking to leaders who not only give back, but help to shape the future of this region through their work and their commitment. So in today's conversation, we're going to be diving into stories and values passed down through families, the role of the private sector in community impact, the connection between civic engagement and economic development, and advice for both nonprofit and business leaders who want to make a difference. So let's get started. We've got two terrific guests with us today. Our first guest is Peyton Bryant. He is a managing partner and broker in charge with Trinity Partners in Columbia, South Carolina, and he oversees operations, recruiting, and business development. You are a Wake Forest graduate, a proud Demon Deacon, and you've been dedicated to United Way really from the jump. You have served as chair of our Tocqueville Society. You have served on our Young Leaders Society Steering Committee, our Campaign for Good Committee. You currently serve on our board of directors, so you're one of my bosses. And when Peyton is not making moves in commercial real estate or giving back to the community, you will find him chasing his two daughters, playing a round of golf, or mowing his lawn. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sara.
And our next guest, our second guest, is Peyton's mom, Sharon Bryant. She is executive vice president. She is regional executive vice president at First Citizens Bank and is a true pillar of the Midlands community. With more than 40 years in the banking industry, Sharon has not only built a professional career that's very impressive, but you have also dedicated decades of service to making our region stronger and more connected. Your involvement, we think, with United Way goes back about 30 years. You served as a longtime leadership donor and volunteer. You've been a board member. You co-chaired 2 record-setting campaigns for us, and you were among the first that led our Increasing Impact Revenue Committee that helped to shape the long-term future of the community challenges that we face and how we would shape our impact fund to address that. You have also played a pivotal role. You're one of the founding members of Women in Philanthropy, one of our affinity groups that is now over 430 women strong, that invests $50,000 a year into programs supporting women and children throughout the Midlands. You have mentored young professionals. You have guided nonprofits. Your commitment to service is matched only by the depth of your impact. And Sharon, we are so grateful to have you here today.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Sara.
So we wanted to start out the podcast with an example of generational service. And certainly that is what Sharon and Peyton represent. So I'd like to start out with what the messages were, the examples, how your families, where you grew up, have impacted how you serve today.
Well, I'll take a stab at this.
Okay.
Both of my parents are from small rural towns in South Carolina and have, always been involved in everything that they were asked to do. And so just that spirit of giving and embracing your community was always the message in my home. Mm-hmm. But I really watched my father, who was an attorney here in Columbia, just really jump into the community and find ways to make a difference. And, he always would say, to whom much is given, much is expected. Yeah. And so, he would volunteer with the Lions Club. He would volunteer with the chambers. He would get involved in the community. He would feed the homeless. He would do lots of things because he genuinely believed that it was the right thing to do. Mm. And so I was on a Christmas tree lot with the Optimists when I was 2. So, hiding amongst the branches as he sold trees to help raise money to support children. So, again, I think it was an example that was set by my parents.
So it wasn't necessarily anything explicit that was said or an expectation that was set. It was just looking around you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It was modeling. It was showing me what to do by example, by getting involved. It was never really a conversation beyond it's important to be a part of your community, to be a part of the fabric that builds where you live.
Yeah.
Now, that was said,
Yeah.
but mostly by example.
Yeah. Well, children, they watch what we do a lot more than they listen to what we say.
That is so true. So true.
So no pressure, Peyton, since you're sitting right next to your mom.
I know.
But
I'm listening.
yeah.
Got to give Dad all the credit. No, I would say mine was both. It was not only it was the modeling, but it was also the sitting down and the talking about what is important and why it's important. My mom and dad were never afraid to tell me what they thought I needed or should be doing. But it's interesting, in the Christian faith, people talk about having a Damascus Road experience when they come to their faith, right? Or conversely, folks just slowly over time build a faith and realize it's something that they've always known, and how do they grow into that? And I would say, my approach to serving and giving back is a lot of that way, of the latter. When I was growing up, it's funny, it was, did you do your homework? Did you do your chores? Have you made your bed? And what have you done for other people? Or when you go to get your summer job, or you plan to get you're planning your education, what are you going to do for others? How are you going to serve around that? And so when I graduated college, it was, hey, you've got a United Way in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They have a Young Leaders Division. Go get involved with that. It was something that I just knew I was going to do. I didn't really have to think about it, or give it, or question it much. It was just, hey, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And so that's been a blessing for me. As I got older, I realized, not everybody feels this way, that giving and serving are things, that you really have to encourage and you have to build. It's what the United Way works to do, to encourage all of that. And I've been fortunate that it's just always been something that I knew to do as a part of life. It was, along with every other thing of life, is serving and giving back. My dad would tell me, he would say, son, I hope you realize how fortunate you are, to have all the opportunities and the things that you have. And, I think the unsaid question was, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always an interesting dichotomy between setting up an expectation to serve and cultivating a desire to serve. There's a little bit of a difference there. And it's been interesting to me as I've watched over the years, because when I was working for Wachovia in Winston-Salem, there was definitely the expectation that you're going to give back. If you were an up-and-coming executive, you needed to serve on a board. If we had the traditional United Way campaign where, you were expected to give. And it's a question of how do you turn the expectation into a desire? And I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on that.
Well, in business, with my team, I always talk about the why. When you have a decision to make, or you have a change that you're making in the organization, in order to create understanding and followership and buy into the change, it's important that people understand why. And I don't think we do that enough in the nonprofit world, really explaining why we do what we do and how someone's commitment and service can truly make a difference. Because I hear people, well, they already have hundreds of volunteers. They don't need me. And, so I really think that sometimes it's a misunderstanding or a perception that has been formed about the importance of service, and that individual can truly make a difference, and that we can help them find their spot. Because it's just like when you ask donors for money, it's important to understand where their heart is and what they're interested in. And then once you find that magical spot, it kind of opens up the ability for folks to give more.
Yeah.
And I think service is the same way. We need to help people find where they fit. And sometimes we ask them to do things that they're not comfortable with. And then, I just think there's lots of opportunity for us to have a little bit more communication with each other, whether it's corporately or whether in the communities, and helping people find their spot and their place. I started in 1983 with the United Way, actually.
It's been 40
and it
years.
was, where do you want to get involved, and do you understand what the United Way does for our community? And as a financial services provider and the number of customers that we serve inside of a community, it was important that we be aligned with the United Way. But then I learned a lot more about actually what United Way was doing and the difference that it was making. And so then it changed from an expectation of being a young banker to being heartfelt, that I really wanted to make a personal difference in the community.
Peyton, did you have a point? You obviously, growing up, as you were describing, had the same thing, had examples set by your parents. You had expectations verbalized to you. What would you say were the points for you in college, young adulthood, early professional career where it switched from being an expectation to being a desire? Because I mean, I work closely with you on a number of things, and you genuinely want to serve this community. So are there times that you can point to where some kind of switch flipped for you?
Absolutely. Going back to kind of what my dad said, I hope you understand how fortunate you are. And frankly, when I was a little kid, I didn't know how fortunate I was.
Sure.
I looked around and everybody had food on their plate and everybody went to school and everybody, was generally healthy. And so it was hard for me to understand what is the opposite of this? What is the alternative? So graduating college and starting to serve with the United Way and putting myself in some of these uncomfortable positions of seeing the world as it is for a lot of people and not just me, really popping this bubble, that I had lived in for a number of years. That was probably a real big part of that switch, realizing, wow, like you can't really appreciate fortune until you have understood misfortune. And so that for me, I would say it turned from an expectation to a desire, yes, but the way I look at it largely is a response. It's hey, Peyton, to look in the mirror and say, you have been given opportunity, you've been given a loving family, you've been given all of these things. What are you going to do to return this blessing? And it really is faith driven for me. I go back to Genesis 12. God says to Abraham, I'm going to bless you and I'm going to make you into a great nation. And I expect you to then be a blessing to other people. And by no means am I Abraham of the Bible, but I do see myself as saying, hey, Peyton, God has blessed you. What are you then going to do about it? And it's interesting. You talk about a single moment. I do recall, I was thinking about this the other day. My parents not only had a great influence on me, but of course my little sister. And my little sister Paige has a heart of gold. And I think I was probably in college, which would have meant Paige was an early teen. And one Christmas I came home and we're making preparations for Christmas, excited for Christmas morning. We're going to see what Santa brought. We're going to have Mom's breakfast casserole. Mom doesn't cook very often, but she makes breakfast casserole on Christmas morning. And we're going to do all these things, and it's going to be about us, and it's going to be fantastic. And she said, hey, brother, she actually used to call me Bubba when she was a little kid. Hey, Bubba, I have a request of you. On Christmas morning, will you go with me to Trinity Cathedral to serve an early lunch to the homeless?
Paige said this.
Paige said this. She's
Ooh,
probably 12 or 13 years
at
old.
some point too.
Cannot be much older than that. And I'm just like, you have just railroaded all of my Christmas Day plans. And of course, Mom and Dad were like, I think it's a wonderful idea. And so we go down to Trinity first thing in the morning. It was probably a breakfast. And I'm like, okay, how can I position myself to be like handing out bread, refilling the food, something behind the scenes that requires no interaction with what's going on? And I was the last to get an assignment, and they said, Peyton, you're the greeter. Like, you're going to stand at the door, and as these homeless folks walk in that are down and out on Christmas morning, you're going to greet them and welcome them and tell them Merry Christmas and good morning. And I tell you, it was probably the greatest hour of my life because they were so full of joy and gratitude, and it was Merry Christmas, God bless you. I mean, I'm like literally, tears were coming down my eyes as I'm just shaking hands, and I'm 21 years old, and I realized, wow, you have got it so good. From henceforth, you've got to go and make something of yourself, and you've got to give back because, you just, frankly, you don't deserve what you have. You've been fortunate to have it, and so go return it. I would say that's probably the pivotal kind of switch flipping moment that I had when I was young.
Wow. I had a switch flip moment, and it had to do with speaking to First Citizens at your campaign kickoff. This was before I joined United Way. This is when I was still at Eden's. Oh. And you asked me to come and be the speaker.
Oh, that's right.
That was, I don't know, at least 10 years ago, if not more. Yeah. And I had always thought, dropping my kids off at school, when you would see a taxi pull up in front of the school, that I thought, oh, isn't that nice? The taxi driver gets to drop his kid off at school before he starts his shift. And it wasn't until I was doing some research with the folks at United Way trying to put together my remarks that they told me no, that when you see the taxi pull up in front of the school, that is a child whose family is currently homeless. And there's a federal program at the districts, at all the school districts, that makes sure that that student, no matter where they spent the night, gets transported to their school that they had been attending, so the child doesn't have to continue to switch schools. And that was my...
That was your moment?
Oh, yeah, because that's when it enters your real world, and it wasn't the, oh, isn't it nice that the taxi driver gets to drop off his own kid just like the rest of us do before work. That was like, this stuff is real. Mm-hmm. And this is close to home, literally. So I think having those that kind of a Damascus Road experience, yeah, I mean, absolutely. Sometimes to me, the issues that face the community are rather esoteric. We kind of see them from a distance.
True.
And when in reality, they are right there beside us. They're right there beside us. So both of you work for companies that are very community and civically minded. So can you talk about the value of the private sector being involved in the community, and maybe even talk about how being with a very community-minded organization, what that looks like from a culture perspective in your organizations?
Well, goodness, it definitely goes back to the values that are set by the organization. And, again, I'll talk a little bit about First Citizens because, we have kind of the three-legged stool, and it's our clients, our associates, and our communities. Notice I didn't say shareholders. I mean, this is about what promotes and holds a community together and what really helps a business continue to thrive and grow. And it's all three of those things. So to exclude the community, to exclude our involvement in the community would be an atrocity, truthfully. I mean, because it's a good business decision, too. That's probably some question coming later. But quite frankly, all businesses need to be invested in the communities that they serve. And then it also offers an opportunity for the associates to become more educated, to understand the why, to have something that they can rally around together that makes a difference. Mm-hmm. So much of this is heart. I'd say 90% is heart, but there is 10% that is just good business to make sure that you are engaged and supportive as a community as a whole. Because when we look at businesses that are looking at the state of South Carolina and they are coming into our communities, or they want to come into Columbia and create a business opportunity, they're watching. They're looking at our schools, they're looking at our communities, they're looking at the involvement level. There's so many things that factor into this. It's not all just the numbers.
Right.
So I think it's extremely important to understand the values of a company and see what a company is doing inside of its community. And that is truly what First Citizens has done. And we have always had that spirit, and we have always cared very deeply about the people that we serve, of all I'm sorry, I hope you can cut that. But we really appreciate all facets and all of the demographics of the communities that we serve. Yeah. And we see the business reason, but we really see the heart reason because it serves so many. It serves the associate, it helps the customers, and it certainly helps our company as well.
Peyton, you've been part of growing, you've been with Trinity Partners, you are in a business that you're growing with your own two hands. So tell us about how you're incorporating service into the culture of Trinity Partners.
Absolutely. Well, kind of to what Mom said, philanthropy and economic development have got to be hand in hand. Folks are attracted to a community that is not just prosperous and has lots of money and, the highest of the high are doing well, but it's rather, really a rising tide that is lifting all the boats. I mean, that's a slogan that gets thrown around a lot, but to put it very simply, it's very true. And so, our business is based largely upon salespeople who are charged to go out there and build their own business. And they can do that a number of different ways. But I have seen time and time again that the salespeople, the young or old, that get involved in the community, that find something they're passionate about, that are serving civically, that are serving on economic development initiatives, that are just being engaged beyond themselves, are the most successful. Because I think clients are attracted to that, businesses are attracted to that. So that's kind of how we have tried to encourage our folks on an individual basis to say, hey, you're out there building your book of business. We offer you the tools to help. But I can assure you that the more engaged you get and the more things you do, that at the surface and at the time may not feel like you're making much progress, like it's a great use of your time. But I promise in the long run, you're making our community better, and that's going to be better for you as well. It's just, if we look at the private sector and philanthropy and the government sector as silos that can't or shouldn't work together, or they're doing their thing, I don't have to worry about them, and vice versa, we'll never make any progress. I mean, we are in this together. And Columbia has a long way to go in that regard. I think we've come a long way in the recent years. So I'm encouraged, and I think one thing that's important when you look at corporate service, the best companies, the ones that people talk about, that are like, wow, they're really making a difference. I really want to be involved with that company. I want to work for that company. I want to do business with that company, are the ones that are civic and philanthropically minded. It's just plain and simple. A company that comes in and is all about themselves, is all about profits, is all about taking what's theirs, that's short-lived. Yeah. And so, I think it's an easy example that if you want to be a good corporate example and a corporate member of a larger community, giving back and giving of your time has got to be a part of that, as well as your money.
And it seems like that's when I was new into the business world 35 years ago, the message was more about the giving, about the literal giving back, and it was this expectation and that kind of thing. Today, particularly among younger folks, it's more about the cause, and it's more about the why. And what I wonder, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Sharon, you had said 90% heart, 10% good business. But as we think about the tie between a healthy health and human services philanthropic sector and economic development, there's a tie there. If you do not have a good social services network in a community, that is a hindrance, I think. And I think back to when I was in the private sector and working in real estate. When you're looking at land assemblage, or when you're looking at, putting your new shopping center somewhere, there are a lot of other factors besides just vehicle counts and average income in a 3-mile area.
I had a business ask me just last week how we address our social issues in Columbia.
What'd you say?
We don't have time on the podcast for that, Sara. But no, we talked, a little bit about the services that we provide throughout the city, and the different. United Way was a part of the discussion. I will say that, but we addressed that, and we do have some room to grow there. So I have to be completely transparent that we are not where we need to be with addressing all of our social issues in Columbia. But so that right there was proof to me that is certainly in the minds of folks who are considering Columbia as a potential site for business operations.
Yep, completely agree with that, and I completely agree that we've got a ways to go. So, and you're right, we'll do another podcast on that subject.
Sara, people a lot of times confuse philanthropy with being selfless, right? That it's all I have to make time for that. I have to kind of change my attitude about giving back and about serving. But it's interesting, if you look at the data of the things that the charitable world does, United Way specifically, a lot of it comes back around and helps even the most affluent individual. For example, what has always stuck with me is when you guys shared the data about well partners, about the dental clinic. And essentially there was a chronic issue at our two major hospitals of folks going to the emergency room on a regular basis, going back regularly because they had pain or an issue that all started because of something that originated in their mouth with their dental health. And that as Well Partners was more successful in addressing those issues, the emergency room visits dropped.
Right.
The cost of those hospital dropped. At some small level, the cost of healthcare in our local community comes down. And frankly, selfishly, if my daughter breaks her leg or busts her head open, I can take her to the ER knowing that she's going to be able to be served because the ER will not be full of folks that are in there for dental issues because Well Partners has helped solve some of that. So it's just interesting, for folks to say, oh, well, that's not my issue, it's not my problem. But the health of other people impacts us, whether we believe it or not, whether it's the mental health, the physical health. When somebody's, we have an issue right now in our commercial real estate world of retailers and molding into downtown Columbia, because there is a homeless issue and there is a cleanliness issue and there's all these different things that we worry about. And so, if we're able to help those people in the right way, not just temporarily for 30 days, but help them change their lives, then they become contributing members of society. They're living healthier lives. They're paying taxes that are contributing to the lives of other people, right? And then that results in what is potentially a more comfortable and livable downtown area.
That's right.
So it's just interesting. You can actually be quite selfish, and choose to use philanthropy and the United Way as a resource to help serve that selfishness. It's not necessarily advertised that way. It'd be kind of hard sell to put that in a commercial. But folks just kind of consider there's me and then there's others, and what folks need to realize is that those go hand in hand.
They really do. This guy gets it, folks. You're absolutely right. I mean, and the more I think that we can get the message out in the social services space in general, certainly United Way specifically, for what I say grace over, but in the social services sector in general, that's really it. I mean, there is a benefit to everybody in the community, and it's not that hard to make that connection. I mean, you just did in two really good examples, and I think we all need to get that kind of a message out there more. So, couple more things. Tell us about somebody in the community that you think has left a specific legacy or that has impacted your approach to serving our community.
You go first.
Well, not just because she's sitting right beside me, but I will tell you, it is pretty cool to have spent the last 15 years living as an adult in Columbia, and for folks to say, "Are you Sharon Bryant's son?" Because without fail, they just light up and have something wonderful to say about how my mom has impacted their life. Whether it's, just made them laugh in a meeting or led an initiative that absolutely changed the direction of an organization, or a client that, would say, hey, we didn't have anywhere to turn. Sharon Bryant pulled some strings and figured this out, and our business turned around. And so I love your mom. I hear that a lot, and it's really, really cool to experience. And it's funny, a couple years ago, she called me and she said, son, because my parents always addressed me as son, son, I think we are seeing a turning of the tides. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, for many years now, you have been Peyton Sharon's son. And she said, the last few people that have come up to me have said, ma'am, excuse me, are you Peyton's mom? So she said, you're no longer Sharon's son. I am now Peyton's mom. And it kind of did. It kind of did feel like a little bit of a passing of the torch. It was a little like, wow, okay, those are really big shoes to fill. Because there is something very special about Sharon Bryant, both as a business leader and as a mother, that it's just, that's not something you can really bottle up. And take and continue on. So I have very big shoes to fill there. But I would say it's interesting, Sarah. I thought you might ask me this question, and I knew I would suck up to my mom first. And then secondly, as I started looking at people and thinking about people that made a difference, whether it's super personal or even just more community related that I admired, they were all winners of your Humanitarian of the Year award.
Oh, wow.
Jerry and Judy Davis. The legacy that they leave behind. I didn't know I didn't know Judy very well. I had a chance to work with Jerry with Tocqueville Society.
Right.
We met at Blue Marlin with Maria for lunch. He's kind of just this kind of nerdy, kind of got his hands in everything man. And, you know, you start asking people, what do you know about Jerry Davis? Oh, well, he does this, or he travels to Africa, and like he supports a village, or he created this thing, and he thought of this idea, and he's got this invention, and I mean, this way of doing things. And then, of course, upon his death, the generosity that he exhibited with what he has given to the United Way is just, it's pretty incredible. Mike Brennan, you know, Mike Brennan was my very first boss's boss. And what was wonderful about Mike, there are many things that are wonderful about Mike, but I knew, because I knew and I watched Mike carry himself and get engaged and lead. I was like, I believe I've got Mike's support. Even though I'm young and even though my influence is low and I've only got certain things I can do at this juncture, Mike supports me in those. And if it means, you know, not being in the office for a couple hours a week to go do that and to go get involved and to give back, you know, Mike's not wondering why is he not at his desk working. He's saying, you know, well done, Peyton, get out there and serve. It's a really good feeling when you're a young person and you don't have that sort of pressure.
Yeah, for sure.
Instead, the pressure is actually to, hey, go get out there and serve as you wish. And then also James Bennett. I'll never forget, he spoke at a Cocktails and Conversations event, a Tocqueville Society and Young Leaders Society joint event one night. And he got up there and gave the remarks, and he said, "It is more blessed to be able to give than to receive." And so it just kind of highlighted the fact that, you know, there is a difference between giving intentionally, you know, giving by expectation or some sort of outside pressure, and saying, "Hey, I'm able to do this." It is a gift and a privilege. Don't take it for granted and use it wisely. So it was just interesting, and so I admire the United Way for recognizing those people, because if you look at that list and you think you can go online and do that, they are true amazing people that have made a world of difference. So it's such a great thing that you guys do every year, and such a special night for the United Way.
Thank you. Sharon, what about you?
Well, you know, I believe Columbia has a long legacy list of people who have stepped up in the community, from the CEOs of major corporations over the years to two women I want to highlight, Kathy Novinger and Charlotte Berry. Those are two that were very instrumental and formed an impression on me as a female in the corporate world environment, and the importance of being involved, staying involved, and hitting issues head on. And so I've had so many role models, and there's been so many incredible people who have embraced Columbia and its philanthropy. But I have a little word of caution that I want to kind of throw out there, because the business world is changing, the demographics of the people who are in leadership roles today. There's not as many corporate headquarters here, and we all recognize that. So how do we grow the bowl, and how do we recognize that people become involved for different reasons? I keep going back to the why, because early in the 60s and 70s in Columbia, it was all about expectation. The corporations would jump in, they would be the leader of the pack. So now we have to get individuals, we have to get new companies that are coming into Columbia. There are so many people who are doing business right now, right here, that have moved in from different parts of the United States, that don't really understand where we stand on social issues, that don't feel like they have the information. And the pace of change, the pace of life is different, completely different. So we have to take all of this into consideration as we build the next donor base, as we build the next group of associates that will be involved. And so I think that we all have to collectively work together and think a little bit differently and challenge ourselves.
Yeah.
Because it's always the same people I see at the events. It's the same people I see chairing the opportunities that the community has. And I think some of these other folks, they're out there that just need to be asked. First, they need to be identified, and then they need to be asked. Because I would say that most people wake up every day and they want their community to be the very best place it can be, for themselves, for their businesses, for their families, and it's a recruitment tool. So I'm excited, but I do think that we all have to work together to think differently about how we attract, engage more people in what we do.
totally agree with that. And that kind of leads into my last two questions, which are, what advice do you have for the nonprofit sector, nonprofit leaders like me and my peers? Excuse me. And what advice do you have for other business leaders? Because you're right, there is a changing of the guard going on right now. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it.
Well, my advice would be don't make assumptions and don't look to the past as a predictor of the future.
I'm assuming that's to both groups, to both nonprofit leaders and business leaders.
It is. Yeah. It is. It really is. But I'm going to start with nonprofits, so thank you for the clarifying point. When you create boards today, diversify your boards. And what I mean by that is diversity of thought. Diversity of thought of what they're able to contribute. And then use the boards effectively. The boards that are the most successful and the organizations that are the most successful, they put together a board that has diversity of thought, that is willing to be engaged, but then they really take the ownership of working the board, identifying who on that board can help them reach. I'll use information technology, my husband's world, as an example. I mean, he can fly under the radar all day long and no one will pick up the phone. And so because he's an IT company, because he's not in downtown Columbia, so I really believe that we need to use our boards effectively to help us identify, and then we need to find a way to reach, communicate, and engage the associates of those companies. And again, I keep going back to the why. I know I'm being ad nauseum with that, but everyone has a different why, a purpose. And if we don't help identify what that purpose is and how it can help us with the social issues in Columbia, then we've missed.
Right.
So, and to corporate leaders, the corporate world has changed too. And honestly, you know, people laugh and say, "Oh, you have banker's hours." I'm like, you all have no clue what banker's hours actually are today. So the pace is extremely fast. It's high. We're constantly working to engage associates, get the business done, take care of clients, manage growth, manage risk. So nonprofits have to help us find a way to bring them in to help us with our business, and we have to allow the associates the time to do that. Because I think that, you know, again, an engaged associate is not just that they're enjoying what they do, it's that they are embracing the corporate values and that they realize there's more to what they do every day.
Yeah, for sure. Advice to nonprofit leaders, Peyton?
Having spent a lot of what is, relatively speaking, a short period of time in nonprofit leadership, what I would say is the greatest need is diversity of thought, but also the diversity of the donor base. You know, fundraising, it's funny, I don't know why, but I love talking about giving. I just, there's something about determining what the cause is and being able to, once I've understood it, be able to convey it and help organizations fundraise. I don't mind talking about money. It's not uncomfortable for me. And so I have found myself in many times in a role with a nonprofit organization in that fundraising realm. And I enjoy it. I really do. It's generally the last role that most folks say, "Hey, will you come serve?" that they want to have. And that's okay, because somebody's got to fill that. And so having seen that through multiple organizations over the years, what continues to happen, and it's because it's easy and it's often the path of least resistance, is it is a lot of times the same folks over and over and over again. And
then now people just flip and email you or send you a text message and ask you for $15,000. That's an easy NO. So that's this generation as well, is that the assumption, I'm going back to the assumptions, are that you're going to help me save time and you're going to send me an email asking me for, you know, a large sum of money that my corporation has the fabulous opportunity to participate in. But there's no linkage, there's no why, there's no structure to it. So it makes it very easy to hit NO on your keyboard and hit send.
That's going to be the interesting thing as the business leadership landscape continues to change here in this area with younger leaders who are used to texts and shorter periods of time and working more rapidly, it's going to be really interesting to see, because I don't think the relationship building piece of finding out what is your why is going to necessarily change over time.
Well, you're right, and I think
hope.
we will figure it out. But the younger generation, you're typically asking them for $100.
Yeah.
So know your donors. I mean,
Yeah.
you know your donor.
Well, and what
You know how to
United
do
Way
that.
has been doing over the last several years, I mean, if you consider like the evolution of Joey's team and what they're doing and the data analytics, my assumption is that all of that effort is not just so that we can come up with this snazzier text message to send, but so that we can build a relationship with the new donor. It's so we can invite, if we know more about the donor, it's what are they interested in? Let's see if we can, frankly, lure them into doing something that interests them.
Right.
And then
That's
they
true.
understand United Way. And from there, there's a relationship that's built, where even if a text is sent, it's a little bit more well received than it otherwise would have been. But we got to know our donors to get more donors and to diversify that donorship. So it has got to be top of mind, because frankly, if you look at macro generational data, the well that we have continued to go back to is eventually not going to be a well anymore, because they have retired and don't have any interest in hearing from you, or they've passed along and there's a new generation. And so it's, how are we going to bridge that gap and create those new wells? So that is my biggest challenge. It's something that I'm very much a part of helping and molding, and will be for quite some time. And to corporate leaders, I mean, that's certainly something Mom can speak to better, but you hear about unlimited PTO, right? So I hear that more often. What's your PTO policy? We don't have it. It's just kind of a trust factor. I wish there was maybe a more reasonable PTO policy and an unlimited service policy. Hey, you want a mental health day? I have a great opportunity for you. Go sign up with Homeworks and help build a house.
Go take an hour and deliver Meals on Wheels.
Exactly.
We do
Senior
that,
Resource.
actually.
I mean,
we have
that
4 hours a month is completely dedicated
and
to
hopefully
volunteerism.
people take advantage of it. It would be interesting to look and see, in your time systems, do people put in those I hope they do.
Well, that's where if we almost had a job fair type of thing, but where people would come in and kind of talk about what the community has available. I mean, because right now you have to go find it. It doesn't really come to you.
Right.
We have to go search it out, and there's plenty of information on the United Way, on Homeworks, on all the different organizations that are available and encourage, volunteerism. But I think that for the larger companies, coming in and explaining what those opportunities are would help.
Yeah.
But I agree with Peyton. I think having people be involved and be engaged to understand the why, and then get them into a financial reason. And look at Midlands Gives. That's a perfect example of how people love one day, one done. They can go on and they can pick their organization of choice, and it's just a lot of hoopla around one giving day. And so we're getting there. We're learning, and there's so much more to do here in Columbia. And that's the message I hope that people understand, is that you can enjoy being a part of solving things in your community. You can have fun doing it. And that's, I know I'm bouncing around, but the affinity groups are huge. The corporations do like that, because young people love to have fun. And I think they love to have little cocktails. So, if you can put a group together and give them a cocktail and talk about why you're doing, and then get them involved and move them to the next level, well, so be it. So you're helping people find their why.
That's right. Well, I want to thank you both very much for being part of this very first Centennial podcast.
It feels like the first.
With the United Way of the Midlands.
Good luck on your editing.
It has been great. I have learned a lot about both of you, and really appreciate the both of you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being our guests. And thank you all for listening. We have a little Cersei to give to both of our guests here. Thank you for being part of our centennial, our 100th anniversary of United Way of the Midlands. So thank you both very much.
Well, we appreciate you and your entire team and what you do for this community. So we can't end this podcast without a thank you.
Thank you
for
very
your
much.
leadership, Sara.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us.